Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander through an unusual chapter of Roman history. A topic so odd, it might make you question your evening routines. Imagine walking down a cobblestone street in ancient Rome, the warm Mediterranean air brushing against your skin as the distant sound of chattering crowds and clanking metal fills the air. You look around and see people laughing, gossiping, and perhaps most oddly, gargling with urine? Yes, you heard that right. Urine. You probably won't survive this ancient habit, especially if you were expecting something more glamorous from the Roman Empire. But don't worry. We'll ease into this strange world together, starting with a little background on the Romans' approach to hygiene. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, feel free to share your location and the local time with the community in the comments. Let's see where you're drifting off to tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Romans, known for their grand architecture, military prowess, and political power, also had quite a bit to say about personal hygiene. Public baths, sophisticated plumbing systems, and elaborate grooming routines were common in the Roman world. They didn't just view cleanliness as a luxury. It was, in many ways, a societal norm. The Romans didn't just wash for the sake of looking clean. They believed that a clean body equaled a virtuous body. In a society where physicality and cleanliness were symbols of one's place in the social hierarchy, these practices mattered immensely. But even within this highly developed hygiene culture, there was one particular practice that seems, well, a little more bizarre than others. We're talking about the ancient Roman habit of using urine as mouthwash. Yes, ancient Romans, our proud forebearers, saw something we might wrinkle our noses at as a crucial part of their dental health routine. Historians still argue about whether it was the ammonia in urine that made it such a powerful cleanser, or if it was more about its general cleaning properties. But whatever the reason, they weren't shy about it. So, with that image now in your mind, let's dive deeper into the strange yet fascinating world of Roman hygiene and why exactly they thought urine was the perfect solution for fresh breath. Now that you've got a mental picture of Romans, all prim and proper in their public baths, let's take a deeper dive into how hygiene actually played out in daily Roman life. The concept of cleanliness in ancient Rome wasn't just about taking a quick rinse here and there. It was woven into the very fabric of Roman society. From the humblest slaves to the most powerful emperors, bathing was a social activity, a communal event that everyone could access in one form or another. Roman public baths, or thermae, were grand, elaborate establishments where people would spend hours lounging in steamy rooms, bathing, chatting, and even conducting business. You could find everything in these places: hot rooms, cold plunge pools, and even exercise areas. The importance of the bathhouses went far beyond cleanliness. It was about socializing, maintaining physical health, and taking part in the social fabric of the city. But here's the odd part. While all this cleanliness was happening, the Romans didn't exactly have the same concept of clean that we do today. They didn't have toothpaste or mouthwash in the modern sense. In fact, they didn't have anything that even resembled the dental care we're accustomed to. Still, it wasn't for lack of trying. Roman society was all about practicality. So when they looked for ways to clean their teeth, they turned to what was readily available: urine. Now, before you run away in horror, remember that the Romans didn't see this as repulsive. For them, it was just another resource. Urine was a natural byproduct that had many uses in their world: cleaning, medicinal purposes, and even for tanning leather. It was, in their minds, just another tool to keep their bodies and mouths clean. Historians still debate whether urine's effectiveness as mouthwash was due to its ammonia content, which could help break down dirt and plaque on teeth, or if it was simply because of its strong odor-masking abilities. What we do know is that this practice wasn't limited to the poor or the uneducated. It was widespread and even used by wealthy Romans. In fact, Roman poet Catullus, famous for his satirical verses, even mentions a rich man's wife who used urine for her beauty regimen. To the Romans, this wasn't something to be embarrassed about. It was simply part of their hygiene routine, much like brushing teeth is for us today. The oddity of this practice lies not just in its use of urine, but in how everyday items like this were incorporated into a larger Roman health philosophy. After all, in a society that valued body care and cleanliness as signs of moral and physical integrity, using something as seemingly repugnant as urine for dental health would likely have been seen as an effective, albeit unconventional method. It's fascinating, isn't it? To think that in a time when marble statues and grand temples were being built, people were also brushing their teeth with liquid gold, or at least they thought it was gold in its own way. And yet, despite their sophistication in public health systems and hygiene routines, the Romans didn't have the best dental outcomes in the end. This is partly because their diet, although diverse, was often abrasive, containing coarse grains, meats, and lots of wine, all of which could damage teeth over time. So, while their urine mouthwash might have had some benefits, it likely wasn't enough to prevent the inevitable wear and tear that came with their food and drink habits. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of urine as mouthwash was a testament to the ingenuity of Roman healthcare or a bizarre reflection of their misunderstanding of germs and bacteria. Either way, it's an undeniably interesting window into how ancient cultures approached hygiene and health. A far cry from the world of minty, fresh breath we are familiar with today. As we linger on the peculiar world of ancient Roman hygiene, let's dive a bit deeper into the surprising number of medical and household uses for urine. You might be thinking, why didn't they just stick with mint leaves or, I don't know, some actual toothpaste? But in the ancient world, resources were often repurposed in ways that may seem strange by our standards. Urine was no exception. It was seen as a practical, all-purpose item in a Roman household. The Romans were not shy about using the substances at hand to fulfill multiple needs. For instance, urine's primary chemical ingredient, ammonia, is a potent cleaning agent. When mixed with water, it created a solution that could clean anything from clothing to floors to, yes, teeth. This powerful natural cleaner was also used for laundry. Roman laundries were notorious for their reliance on urine to bleach and soften fabrics. Fullers, the workers who handled the cleaning of clothes, would wash garments by stomping on them in tubs of urine. The ammonia acted as a bleach, and the process was so effective that Roman laundry was regarded as some of the best in the ancient world. But let's bring the focus back to mouthwash. The idea that urine could clean teeth wasn't just based on a casual belief. It was rooted in Roman medical thinking. The use of bodily fluids for medicinal purposes was common, and urine had been used for centuries across many cultures. Roman physicians didn't have modern medicines or antiseptics, so they turned to what they understood as the next best thing. Urine's antibacterial properties were known to them, and they might have even believed it had some magical or purifying properties. There's an odd beauty in how the Romans blended practicality with mysticism. Urine, like many other natural substances, was not just a waste product, it was a vital resource. This approach extended beyond dental care too. Roman medical texts suggest that urine could be used to treat a variety of conditions, from wounds to sore throats to even eye infections. Urine was indeed a universal remedy in their eyes, and its applications were vast. Historians still argue over the cultural significance of urine in the ancient world. Was it simply a tool of convenience, or did it hold a deeper symbolic meaning for the Romans? Some scholars think it may have been considered a form of purification, a way to cleanse oneself not only physically but spiritually. Given the Roman emphasis on hygiene as a moral and physical virtue, using something as personal and intimate as urine in such a public way may have been seen as part of a larger philosophy of health. What's fascinating too is how this seemingly disgusting practice was widespread among different social classes. From soldiers to slaves to emperors, urine wasn't reserved for the lower classes. In fact, some of the wealthiest Romans reportedly used urine in their beauty regimens. Emperor Augustus's wife, Livia, is said to have been one of the first to endorse the use of urine as a beauty treatment. For her, it wasn't just about fresh breath, it was part of an entire routine that focused on rejuvenation and youthful skin. The elite, who could afford all kinds of luxury, were not immune to the allure of urine as a tool for health and beauty. The Roman obsession with hygiene, though, wasn't just about using urine, it was about a holistic approach to personal care. Romans used a variety of herbs, oils, and even exercise to maintain their health. Still, when it came to teeth, they didn't have the modern tools we take for granted today. No toothbrushes or toothpaste, just a rag soaked in urine or a wooden stick to scrape away the grime. Sometimes, they even used crushed bones or ground up oyster shells as a kind of toothpaste. While they certainly lacked the refinement of modern dental care, they were still innovative in finding ways to take care of their teeth using what they had. As strange as it may seem to us, it's important to remember that this was a time when most people in the Western world didn't have access to clean water or modern sanitation. The Romans, despite their advanced plumbing systems, still lived in a world full of diseases, unsanitary conditions, and the constant threat of infection. Urine, to them, was something they could control, something that could be harnessed for healing. It's strange to think about now, but it made sense in their world. Historians continue to debate the specific uses of urine in ancient Roman medicine. Some argue that its widespread use was due to a lack of understanding of germ theory. Others believe it was because they didn't see bodily fluids as inherently dirty, at least not in the same way we do today. To them, urine was a natural part of life, and using it for cleaning, healing, and even beauty treatments was just another part of the cycle. Now that we've spent some time exploring how deeply ingrained urine was in the everyday lives of Romans, let's focus a bit more on the fascinating world of Roman dentistry, or more accurately, their lack thereof. When we think of dental hygiene today, we imagine toothbrushes, toothpaste, and regular trips to the dentist. But in ancient Rome, the situation was far more rudimentary. If you had the privilege of living in the wealthier parts of the empire, you might have had access to rudimentary dental care. But for most, it was a lot less sophisticated. The Romans, like many ancient civilizations, didn't have the luxury of fluoride, toothpaste, or even a solid understanding of oral health. They did, however, understand the importance of clean teeth, and they made do with what they had. In fact, they had a wide array of ways to clean their teeth, and urine was just one part of this routine. Roman dental care included things like chewing on twigs, or using various abrasives like crushed bones or oyster shells to scrub their teeth. These substances, while effective in scraping away plaque, could also damage enamel and contribute to the eventual decay of teeth. But for the time being, this was the best solution they had. They didn't have access to modern dental technology, so they had to get creative. It wasn't just the common folk who struggled with tooth care. Even the wealthy had their issues. The upper classes in Rome could afford better materials for cleaning their teeth, but they still didn't have the advanced dental solutions we take for granted today. So, when it came to freshening their breath and ensuring that their teeth were as clean as possible, many Romans turned to urine as a mouthwash. The reason? Well, it's all about ammonia. The ammonia found in urine is a powerful compound that has the ability to break down the grime on your teeth. It's not a perfect solution by modern standards, but back in the day, it did the job. Now, you might be wondering how this could possibly be considered an acceptable solution. It's important to remember that the Romans didn't have the knowledge we do about bacteria and germs. To them, the ammonia in urine made it a powerful cleaner. It wasn't about whether or not it was gross by modern standards. It was about its effectiveness. And in a world without proper sanitation, where diseases like dysentery and malaria ran rampant, any solution that could improve hygiene and fight off unpleasant smells was likely considered worth a try. And then, of course, there's the simple fact that the Romans were experts at repurposing materials. If urine could clean clothes, why couldn't it clean teeth? If it could be used to treat wounds and prevent infections, surely it had other uses as well. The Roman mindset wasn't about waste, it was about maximizing what they had at their disposal. And in a society where personal hygiene was linked to one's social status and virtue, no tool, no matter how unconventional, was off limits. But it wasn't just the elite who used urine for oral hygiene. While it may sound shocking to us, many common Romans, especially soldiers and travelers, also used urine as a mouthwash. In fact, it was so widespread that Roman poets and authors occasionally referenced the practice in their works. Urine wasn't just a symbol of everyday Roman life. It was woven into their routines in ways that we would find unimaginable today. Some even went as far as to say that it was a necessary part of Roman health, so much so that it was almost a badge of Roman identity. Historians continue to debate how widespread the use of urine for mouthwash really was. Was it a common practice among all classes? Or was it more restricted to the wealthy elite who could afford to use it for beauty treatments as well? Some argue that it was most likely a working class practice since they had the least access to other means of dental care. But no matter where it was used, one thing is clear. The ancient Romans didn't shy away from using the resources available to them, and they weren't afraid to use something as unconventional as urine to solve practical problems. What's particularly fascinating is how this approach to dental hygiene stands in stark contrast to the modern world, where we have all sorts of specialized products designed specifically for maintaining our teeth. We have toothpaste, mouthwash, floss, and even whitening treatments. And yet, the Romans managed to get by with their own unique brand of ingenuity, proving that sometimes necessity really is the mother of invention, even if that invention involves something a little unusual. So, as we continue our journey through the oddities of Roman life, it's important to remember that what we might find gross or off-putting was simply part of a larger worldview in ancient Rome. A world where things weren't necessarily clean by modern standards, but they were functional. The Romans may not have had our modern dental care, but they certainly made do with what they had. And that's something we can appreciate, even if we won't be following their lead when it comes to mouthwash anytime soon. Let's pause for a moment and shift our attention away from mouthwash to the broader world of Roman beauty standards, where urine again finds its way into unexpected places. As strange as it may sound, urine wasn't just a handy resource for keeping teeth clean. It also played a surprisingly prominent role in Roman beauty routines. To our modern sensibilities, the idea of using bodily fluids as part of skincare is, at best, shocking, and at worst, deeply repulsive. But in ancient Rome, urine was considered a key ingredient in maintaining youthful skin and preserving a beautiful appearance. In fact, it was so common that even wealthy Roman women would often include it as part of their daily regimen. The use of urine in beauty treatments wasn't just about its cleaning properties. It was believed to have therapeutic effects on the skin. Think about it. The ammonia in urine, which helped break down grime on teeth, also had a similar effect on the skin, helping to exfoliate and rejuvenate. Roman women would soak sponges in urine and then use them to wash their faces, thinking that it would keep their skin smooth and clear. This practice was even mentioned by the famous Roman poet and satirist Martial, who wrote about the women of Rome using aged urine as part of their beauty routine. But urine wasn't the only unusual ingredient in Roman beauty treatments. The Romans were known for their use of oils, perfumes, and powders, some of which were made from ingredients we might now consider equally peculiar. For example, they used the oil of crushed olives and the fat of sheep as moisturizers, and they would also apply a mixture of crushed ants and honey to their skin for its purported beauty benefits. There's also the infamous Roman perfume made from animal musk, which they believed had a deeply restorative effect on the body. In fact, some historians suggest that the whole concept of using organic beauty products may have come from Rome, where natural materials were valued over synthetic ones. But it's clear that urine was a major part of Roman beauty routines, from hair care to skin care, and even in treating eye infections. The urine used in beauty treatments was often allowed to ferment, turning it into a kind of aged urine, believed to be even more potent for its cleansing properties. Women of high social standing, particularly those in the imperial court, might have had access to the best, most refined urine, while the lower classes would use whatever was available. Historians still debate the effectiveness of these beauty treatments, and there are even some who suggest that the widespread use of urine in these methods was tied to the Roman ideal of purity and cleanliness. After all, the Romans were obsessed with their appearance, with beauty often equated to status, and maintaining a youthful look was just as important as keeping one's teeth clean. The paradox here is that while we might look at these Roman beauty routines with raised eyebrows, they were actually ahead of their time in many ways. They recognized the benefits of natural organic substances, something that modern beauty and skincare brands are only beginning to appreciate again. It's interesting to think about how modern beauty trends have come full circle, with many current treatments advocating for the use of more natural, ancient ingredients. So, in a way, the Romans were pioneers of a beauty regimen that's become more popular in the modern world. But despite this ancient wisdom, it's hard to imagine that anyone would be willing to go to the lengths the Romans did, using urine as part of their daily beauty routine. The sheer intimacy of it seems so foreign to us. However, if you were living in ancient Rome, it was all about what worked, and if urine was the secret to staying fresh and youthful in a time when daily hygiene was a luxury, then that's what they used. In many ways, it's a testament to the Roman ability to make the most of everything they had, even if that meant using something most modern people would never dream of incorporating into their self-care regimen. Perhaps it's also a reflection of their mentality. Nothing was off limits if it could benefit the body or mind. That includes urine, which was, in their eyes, just another tool in their quest to maintain health, beauty, and, above all, Roman dignity. Now, of course, we might not be rushing to the bathroom to gather a cup of urine for our next skincare treatment. But in the Roman world, these unconventional practices were part of their daily lives. Their belief in the power of urine wasn't a matter of odd superstition. It was based on their understanding of the materials at hand, and it worked in the context of the times. The next time you find yourself using some fancy modern skincare product, just remember, there was once a time when urine was considered a luxury treatment in ancient Rome. Now that we've explored how urine was a key ingredient in both dental and beauty routines in ancient Rome, let's take a step back and reflect on the Roman mindset towards medicine in general. As we've seen, the Romans weren't afraid to turn to unconventional methods when it came to health and wellness, and urine was certainly no exception. While they lacked the understanding of germ theory and modern hygiene, they were resourceful, using whatever they had at their disposal to treat everything from minor ailments to more serious conditions. One of the most fascinating aspects of Roman medicine was their reliance on natural remedies and materials. In a time long before antibiotics, vaccines, or even the concept of sterile environments, the Romans had to get creative with their medical treatments. They didn't just use urine for mouthwash and skin care, they used it for healing wounds, treating eye infections, and even as a treatment for hair loss. And that's just the beginning. While we might not immediately associate urine with healing today, in ancient Rome, it was considered a universal remedy. Physicians like Dioscorides, a 1st century Greek pharmacologist who lived and worked in Rome, wrote extensively about the medicinal uses of urine. According to him, urine was thought to have antiseptic properties, making it useful for cleaning wounds and preventing infections. There was also a belief that urine could be used as a diuretic, helping to flush toxins out of the body, which would have been beneficial in an era when cleanliness and sanitation were limited. But the use of urine in Roman medicine wasn't just about practicality, it was also tied to the larger Roman worldview. The Romans believed that the body and mind were interconnected, and that balance was the key to health. To them, urine was a part of the natural cycle, a necessary waste product that could be harnessed to restore balance to the body. Using it for healing or personal care wasn't just about cleaning or treating specific ailments. It was about maintaining harmony between the body's internal processes. Roman medical practices were not purely based on trial and error, though. There were established medical schools and physicians who specialized in different areas of care, from surgery to herbal remedies to dentistry. In fact, some of the most renowned physicians of the time, like Galen, made groundbreaking contributions to medicine. Galen, for example, was a physician to the gladiators and later became the personal doctor to the emperor. He was one of the first to theorize about the importance of balancing the body's humors. Blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile in order to maintain health. While his theories have since been debunked, his work laid the foundation for much of medieval and early modern medical thought. But despite these advancements, Roman medicine was still very much a product of its time. The understanding of disease, infection, and anatomy was rudimentary, and treatments like urine therapy were often based on tradition rather than scientific evidence. Yet, for all their lack of scientific understanding, the Romans had a remarkably sophisticated medical infrastructure. Public health was taken seriously, with public hospitals, called valetudinaria, set up to care for soldiers and complex systems of water distribution that helped reduce the spread of disease in urban areas. Historians still debate whether urine's widespread use in Roman medicine was a symbol of Roman ingenuity or simply a result of their limited knowledge of the human body. Some argue that it reflects their belief in the body's ability to heal itself, while others suggest that it was merely a convenient solution to a lack of better alternatives. Either way, it's clear that urine was a ubiquitous part of Roman life, used for much more than just personal hygiene. When you consider how deeply ingrained urine was in Roman society, it's hard not to wonder how this influenced their broader understanding of health and medicine. The idea that urine could cleanse, heal, and restore balance to the body suggests a worldview where everything, no matter how gross or unpleasant, had a purpose in the grand scheme of things. In a way, this approach to health might have been a reflection of the Roman ethos: resourcefulness, practicality, and the belief that nothing should go to waste. In today's world, we would probably turn our noses up at the thought of using urine as medicine. But for the Romans, it was just another way of using what nature provided them. While modern medicine has come a long way since then, the Roman use of urine serves as a reminder of the lengths people will go to in order to survive, heal, and maintain their well-being. In their world, urine was as essential as any other substance, just another part of the daily cycle that kept the empire running smoothly. As we continue exploring the fascinating and often surprising ways the Romans utilized urine, it's important to take a moment and appreciate how this practice fits within the context of their broader health and sanitation systems. At first glance, it may seem bizarre or even repulsive, but when we dig deeper into Roman society, we begin to see how the use of urine was in line with their advanced approach to public health. The Romans were pioneers in sanitation and public health long before the advent of modern medicine. Their impressive aqueduct systems, public baths, and sewage infrastructure were not only technological marvels of their time, but also foundational to the development of urban living. While many ancient societies struggled with basic sanitation, the Romans went to great lengths to keep their cities clean. They understood the importance of water management, and their plumbing systems helped reduce the spread of disease in crowded cities. It wasn't perfect by modern standards, but it was leagues ahead of most other civilizations at the time. The Roman focus on cleanliness didn't end with the public baths or aqueducts, though. The widespread use of urine as a cleaning agent, whether for washing clothes, scrubbing floors, or even for dental care, speaks to the Roman attitude towards waste. To the Romans, nothing was truly waste. Everything had a function, and even something as seemingly unpleasant as urine could be repurposed for practical uses. It wasn't considered dirty or unclean in the way we might think of it today. Rather, it was simply another resource that could be put to work for the greater good. In fact, the Roman view of waste products like urine was part of their larger worldview of sustainability. They lived in a world of limited resources, where everything from food to tools had to be carefully managed. Using urine for multiple purposes, whether for medicine, beauty, or cleaning, was just another example of their ingenuity in making the most of what they had. As advanced as their plumbing and sanitation systems were, they still lived in a world where the basics of hygiene and health could often rely on everyday substances that we might find uncomfortable or even repulsive. Historians still argue whether this mindset was born of necessity or innovation. Some suggest that the widespread use of urine for various purposes reflected a lack of access to more advanced materials. Others argue that the Romans were simply pragmatic, finding ways to solve problems with the resources they had. Either way, it's clear that Roman society was incredibly resourceful, using everything at their disposal to maintain a clean, functioning civilization. Despite their understanding of basic public health, the Romans still didn't have the scientific knowledge we have today about germs, bacteria, and disease transmission. Their methods of sanitation were based on practicality and observation, not microbiology. While they knew that bathing was important for health and cleanliness, they couldn't have known about the invisible germs they were potentially coming into contact with. Still, their systems helped reduce the spread of many diseases, and their approach to sanitation set the groundwork for public health systems in later civilizations. In Roman times, the idea of using urine for medical purposes was not as unthinkable as it might seem now. The average Roman would have been far more accustomed to using natural remedies and treatments derived from the world around them than to relying on the modern medications and antiseptics that we take for granted. Urine was just one of many natural treatments used by Roman physicians. They also relied on herbs, animal products, and other substances that today might seem just as unusual as urine. The Romans didn't have access to pharmacies full of pills and ointments, so they made use of what was available in their environment. Even if it was a bodily fluid, most people today would avoid at all costs. While we may find it difficult to understand why urine was such a prominent part of Roman health practices, we have to remember that these were a people who viewed the body and its processes as interconnected with nature. They didn't separate the body's waste from its overall function. Everything was part of a natural cycle, and using substances like urine to treat health issues was simply part of their holistic approach to medicine. In the Roman mind, there was no waste to be discarded, only resources to be used. This mindset, coupled with their practical ingenuity, allowed the Romans to create a complex and successful society. While we may look back at their methods with disbelief, we must also acknowledge that these primitive practices helped sustain one of the most powerful empires the world has ever known. Urine may not be a cure-all, but in the Roman world, it was an essential part of life, health, and society. And while we may never use urine for mouthwash or beauty treatments ourselves, it's a testament to the Roman capacity for invention and resourcefulness that we still talk about it today. So far, we've explored the fascinating ways the Romans used urine in their hygiene and health routines. But let's now turn our attention to the social context of this practice. In ancient Rome, hygiene wasn't just a personal matter. It was a public one. There was a strong cultural connection between cleanliness, social status, and moral virtue. How you took care of yourself and your body was directly tied to how society viewed you. But did this mean that using something like urine for mouthwash or beauty treatments was considered a mark of high social standing? Or was it a necessity for all? Let's explore the social dynamics of Roman hygiene. Romans, especially those living in the bustling urban centers like Rome itself, had a highly developed sense of public health. Public baths were an integral part of daily life, not just for washing, but for maintaining social connections and gaining access to various types of medical treatments. In many ways, these baths functioned as community centers, places where people from all walks of life could gather to relax, cleanse, and exchange ideas. Public baths were free for many, and it was in these communal spaces that hygiene was emphasized as a social activity. But what about personal hygiene, like oral care and skin care? How did using urine for these purposes fit into Roman society's views of cleanliness and social norms? Interestingly, the use of urine was not confined to the lower classes, as one might expect. Although it might seem like a practice relegated to the poor or those without better access to proper dental care, urine was actually used by people from all walks of Roman life, including the upper class. Even some of the wealthiest Romans are believed to have used it as part of their personal care routine. After all, the use of natural remedies, including urine, was widespread in a society that didn't yet understand modern medical principles. In fact, the practice of using urine wasn't even considered an oddity by the Roman elite. For the wealthy, it was just another tool in a luxurious health regimen. Many elite women, such as the wives of Roman emperors, are said to have included urine in their beauty routines, believing it could help maintain smooth skin and youthful features. To them, urine wasn't seen as something dirty or shameful. It was simply a resource, like olive oil or honey, that could be used for beauty and health purposes. For the Roman elite, the act of using urine for mouthwash or as a facial treatment was more about the practical use of available resources than anything else. It wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was just part of an overall regimen of self-care that they believed helped maintain their beauty, health, and social status. For the lower classes, however, the situation was a bit different. The use of urine was more likely a matter of necessity than choice. These Romans, who often had fewer resources and less access to luxury goods, would have used urine as a practical solution to their hygiene needs. For them, it wasn't about the symbolism of beauty or wealth. It was a matter of finding something effective and accessible. And in the context of Roman society, where hygiene was linked to virtue and status, it wasn't just about staying clean. It was about demonstrating one's place in the social order. Cleanliness, after all, was seen as a reflection of one's personal character and moral standing. Historians still argue about the extent to which urine was used across different social classes. Some suggest that it was most prevalent among the lower classes, who had to make do with whatever they had on hand. Others believe that the practice was widespread, even among the wealthy, as a way to maintain personal hygiene in a society where such things were considered vital to one's social image. What we do know is that the Romans, both rich and poor, were far more open to using urine for health and beauty treatments than we are today. In their eyes, it was not a waste product. It was a resource that had multiple purposes. In addition to the social dynamics surrounding urine use, it's worth considering the larger cultural attitude toward bodily fluids in general. In Roman times, bodily functions weren't seen with the same level of disgust and shame that we often associate with them today. In fact, Roman society was generally more comfortable with these aspects of life than modern cultures tend to be. Public latrines, open bathing areas, and the widespread acceptance of bodily fluids for medical and personal use all reflect a cultural attitude that was far more pragmatic than modern-day sensitivities allow. This cultural difference is one of the reasons why urine wasn't viewed as something offensive in the same way it might be today. To the Romans, bodily functions were just part of life, and if they could make use of them in a beneficial way, then they would. From cleaning floors to treating wounds, from mouthwash to beauty treatments, bodily fluids were seen as tools that helped people maintain their health and well-being. In the Roman worldview, there was no taboo about using something as natural as urine to maintain a clean body or a beautiful face. In modern times, of course, our views on bodily fluids are much more influenced by the discoveries of germ theory and modern hygiene practices. We know now that what we put into our bodies and how we take care of them has profound implications for our health. But in ancient Rome, without the knowledge we have today, urine was simply another resource to be used, often for the benefit of both health and beauty. In their eyes, it was effective and it worked. In their world, this odd practice of using urine was neither embarrassing nor unsanitary. It was just another part of the everyday routine. Let's now take a step back and consider how public baths and the entire Roman approach to personal hygiene helped create the perfect environment for the widespread use of urine as a cleaning agent. Roman baths were more than just places to wash away dirt and grime. They were grand social hubs where individuals could relax, socialize, and maintain their health. Bathing was a highly ritualized activity, and its importance went far beyond simple cleanliness. In fact, for many Romans, it was a way of demonstrating their social standing, virtue, and physical fitness. At the heart of Roman public health was the concept of cleanliness equals virtue, and this applied to both the body and the mind. The act of bathing, especially in public bathhouses, was about maintaining the balance between the physical and the moral. It wasn't just a matter of scrubbing away dirt. It was about cleansing oneself spiritually and mentally. Cleanliness, after all, was a sign of discipline, self-control, and a virtuous lifestyle. The more you bathed, the more you demonstrated your ability to care for yourself, and your social status was often tied to how well you maintained your personal hygiene. This brings us back to our old friend, urine. While the wealthy could afford perfumes, oils, and other luxury goods to maintain their cleanliness, the common Roman had to make use of more practical, everyday substances. Urine, which was widely available and cheap, became an essential tool in their hygiene arsenal. In fact, Roman public bathhouses were often equipped with vats of urine used to wash clothes, as well as a variety of other purposes. The ammonia in the urine was an effective cleaner, and it was readily available to the lower classes who may not have had the luxury of access to expensive soaps or perfumes. The fact that public baths played such a central role in Roman life meant that hygiene practices, such as using urine for cleaning, became part of the shared experience. Whether you were a senator, a soldier, or a slave, you would likely find yourself sharing a public bath at some point. And in those baths, you might be surrounded by the smell of urine, used not only for personal care but for cleaning the floors, scrubbing your skin, and even whitening your teeth. For the Romans, this wasn't a strange or offensive practice. It was simply how things were done. It was a communal activity, a reflection of the culture's focus on cleanliness and order. Roman soldiers, in particular, were known for their frequent use of baths, as their rigorous training and constant travel meant they had limited access to other forms of hygiene. While on the move, soldiers often relied on urine for basic cleaning tasks, whether it was scrubbing their armor, cleaning wounds, or even using it as a disinfectant. The Roman military, after all, was the backbone of the empire, and keeping soldiers healthy and clean was of utmost importance. The practical use of urine for hygiene was just one example of how the Romans applied their resourcefulness to solve problems, even when it came to maintaining the health of their troops. At this point, it's important to acknowledge just how far the Romans were ahead of their time in terms of public health and sanitation. Their aqueducts, bathhouses, and sewage systems were marvels of engineering, helping to prevent the spread of disease and improve overall quality of life. While their understanding of germs and bacteria was limited, their practical approaches to sanitation created an environment where disease transmission was minimized, and personal hygiene was seen as a sign of moral and physical integrity. The Roman obsession with public baths, cleanliness, and personal care laid the foundation for many of the hygiene practices we take for granted today. Historians still debate whether the Roman focus on public baths and hygiene was purely practical, or whether it was tied to a deeper cultural belief in cleanliness as a reflection of social virtue. Some argue that the obsession with bathing and cleanliness was more about social control and reinforcing the values of discipline and order. Others believe that it was genuinely about health and well-being, driven by a desire to create a more physically fit and disease-free society. Regardless of the reasons, one thing is clear: the Romans were ahead of their time in terms of public health, and their sophisticated sanitation practices, combined with their creative use of natural resources like urine, played a vital role in the longevity of the empire. Looking back at the role of urine in Roman society, it's clear that the use of this humble substance was anything but unusual in the context of Roman life. From its use in cleaning and hygiene to its medicinal applications, urine was just another tool in the Roman toolkit. Whether it was used for mouthwash, skincare, laundry, or even as a disinfectant, urine was a resource that the Romans didn't hesitate to exploit. It may seem strange to us now, but in the Roman world, it was simply a part of life, and perhaps more importantly, a testament to the resourcefulness and practicality that defined the civilization. As we continue to explore the Roman approach to health and hygiene, it's fascinating to see how their use of natural resources like urine influenced their understanding of personal care. While we may not adopt these ancient practices today, they offer a unique glimpse into a world where necessity and resourcefulness shaped the way people took care of themselves. And as we consider the complex role that urine played in Roman life, it's clear that this seemingly humble substance was anything but insignificant. By now, you might be starting to realize just how deeply integrated urine was in Roman life, not just as a cleaning agent or medical tool, but also as a powerful symbol of Roman resourcefulness. While today we might find the idea of using urine for mouthwash, skincare, or even in medical treatments utterly bizarre, to the Romans, it was perfectly logical. They were a society that took a holistic approach to health and wellness, often relying on natural resources to treat ailments, maintain personal hygiene, and even enhance beauty. Yet, the story of urine in Roman life is far from simple. It's about more than just practicality. It's about how a civilization built on engineering feats, architectural wonders, and military prowess also understood the importance of using what was available to them. In an empire that spanned vast regions and included a diverse array of people, cultures, and traditions, Romans were keenly aware of the need to adapt and make use of their environment. Whether it was developing advanced plumbing systems, creating public bathhouses, or using urine as a daily cleaning agent, the Romans' approach to health was fundamentally practical. It's worth noting that their reliance on bodily fluids, specifically urine, wasn't unique to Roman society. Across the ancient world, cultures used bodily fluids in various ways for medical, health, and beauty purposes. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and even Chinese civilizations had similar practices. But the Romans, with their extensive networks of public baths and focus on hygiene as an indicator of moral and social standing, were among the most known for it. Their particular usage of urine, however, was marked by the level of routine acceptance in both personal and communal life. It wasn't merely an exotic remedy or a rare treatment, it was part of the daily life of a Roman citizen. But why did the Romans see urine as such an effective tool? There's a fascinating intersection of chemistry and culture that explains part of the answer. In Roman times, the concept of bacteria and disease was still an unknown, and their knowledge of hygiene was built largely on observation and trial and error. They knew that certain substances could clean and purify in ways that others couldn't. Ammonia, found in urine, acted as a powerful cleansing agent, breaking down grime, dirt, and the buildup of plaque. To the Romans, this made sense. Urine was an all-purpose tool, just like vinegar or honey might have been in other ancient cultures. While the scientific knowledge behind these practices was rudimentary, the effectiveness of urine as a cleaning agent was obvious. For the Romans, urine was essentially liquid gold, an accessible, cost-effective, and versatile resource that helped them maintain health and hygiene. Their reliance on this simple yet powerful substance shows just how advanced their thinking was in terms of leveraging the environment for practical solutions. After all, why waste something that could have multiple applications? Historians still argue whether the widespread use of urine was truly a sign of Roman genius or just an example of a society making the most of what was available. Some scholars believe the practice was more of a necessity, a result of the lack of alternatives in an ancient world where hygiene and sanitation were still in their infancy. Others argue that it was an indication of the Romans' pragmatic ingenuity, an ability to turn even the most basic elements of their environment into valuable tools. Regardless of which interpretation you lean toward, it's clear that the Romans knew how to make use of their surroundings in ways that few other ancient civilizations could match. Even today, we are still fascinated by the Romans' innovative methods of using what nature provided. The continued reverence for Roman engineering, public works, and health systems speaks to the lasting legacy of their approach to life. Roman public health initiatives, like aqueducts and public baths, are still admired for their forward-thinking approach to sanitation. And while we don't necessarily share their penchant for using urine as a cleaning agent, the Romans' commitment to maintaining cleanliness, public health, and hygiene has influenced our modern systems of water treatment, public health policy, and even personal care practices. So, the next time you find yourself brushing your teeth or applying a face mask, it's worth reflecting on the many thousands of years of trial, error, and adaptation that led to modern hygiene. The use of urine in ancient Rome may seem absurd to us today, but in their time, it was just another part of a deeply rooted culture of cleanliness and practicality. It was a tool that helped the Romans survive, thrive, and maintain one of the most enduring empires in history. At the same time, there's a larger lesson to be learned from the Roman use of urine. It reminds us that innovation often comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes, the solutions we need are already available to us. They just require a shift in perspective to realize their potential. The Romans didn't have modern dentistry, skincare products, or antibiotics. But they did have something else: a deep understanding of resourcefulness and a willingness to make the most of what they had. And maybe, just maybe, that's a lesson we can all take with us as we navigate our own modern day challenges. As we continue to unravel the strange yet fascinating relationship between the Romans and urine, let's now shift focus to the peculiar role that the Roman military played in perpetuating the use of urine. When we think of Roman soldiers, we usually picture battle-hardened warriors in gleaming armor, marching across the empire to spread the reach of Roman power. But the reality of Roman military life wasn't just about sword fighting and conquering new territories. It also involved a lot of down-to-earth, everyday activities, and health was a key focus, even for soldiers. Roman soldiers, who were often stationed in remote locations far from the conveniences of urban life, had to make use of whatever resources were available to them to maintain both their health and hygiene. While many might associate the Roman military with feats of strength and combat, the soldiers were also highly disciplined when it came to their personal care and cleanliness. Keeping soldiers in good health was an essential part of maintaining a strong, effective military force, and this included ensuring that they had access to basic hygiene supplies. So, it's no surprise that urine became an indispensable resource for the Roman military. Given its natural antibacterial properties, urine was frequently used as a disinfectant and cleaning agent for wounds. Roman soldiers, while far from the luxuries of home, still had to maintain their health and cleanliness in order to perform their duties. Wounds, which were a frequent part of military life, needed to be treated quickly and effectively to avoid infection. And, in the absence of modern antiseptics or antibiotics, soldiers often turned to what they knew worked: urine. The ammonia in urine helped cleanse the wounds, and its antibacterial qualities could prevent infections, at least in the short term. In fact, some sources suggest that Roman military manuals and medical texts specifically recommended the use of urine for this purpose. While it may seem strange to us in the context of the time, it made perfect sense. The soldiers needed practical, effective solutions, and urine, readily available and easy to use, was just another tool in their arsenal. But the military wasn't the only place where urine played a key role in Roman life. It was also used as part of the larger logistical operations of the army. Soldiers often had to travel long distances, and hygiene could suffer if they didn't have access to clean water or proper facilities. Urine became a practical solution for not just cleaning wounds, but also for maintaining personal hygiene on the go. From brushing teeth to washing their faces, urine was an all-purpose resource that could be used in the field, far from the comforts of a Roman bathhouse. Moreover, Roman soldiers, known for their adaptability and innovation, were likely the ones who spread the practice of using urine as a cleaning agent throughout the empire. As they marched from one region to the next, they would have encountered different cultures and local customs, but urine would have been one constant in their daily lives. It's likely that Roman soldiers taught their practices, including the use of urine as a medical and hygiene tool, to people in the provinces they conquered. This is how many Roman hygiene practices were passed down through generations and eventually influenced other cultures around the Mediterranean. The Roman military's use of urine also highlights the larger Roman philosophy of resourcefulness. They didn't have the luxury of running water or antiseptics, but they made do with what was available to them. The Roman legion's ability to maintain hygiene, even under the harshest conditions, was part of what made them such an effective force. A soldier's health was directly tied to the success of the army. So using whatever resources they could find, including urine, was just a smart way to ensure that soldiers remained in fighting shape. Historians still debate how widely used urine was among Roman soldiers. Some argue that it was an essential tool in their daily routines, while others believe it may have been more of a last resort, used only in the absence of better alternatives. Regardless of how frequently it was used, it's clear that Roman soldiers didn't shy away from unconventional solutions to maintain their health. While we might find it difficult to imagine a soldier using urine to clean a wound or freshen their breath, for the Romans, it was just another part of their practical, no-nonsense approach to survival. The soldiers didn't have the luxury of modern medicine, but they did have a long history of resourcefulness. In a way, their reliance on urine for hygiene and healthcare only reinforces the Romans' reputation as a civilization that knew how to make the most of what they had. So, as we look back on the role of the Roman military in perpetuating the use of urine, we can appreciate the broader lessons it teaches us about practicality, adaptation, and resourcefulness. While the idea of using urine as a health tool may seem outdated and strange to us today, for the Romans, it was a logical, effective solution in the absence of modern medical knowledge. The fact that this practice persisted throughout the empire speaks to the ingenuity and adaptability of the Roman people. Now that we've explored how urine played a role in the Roman military and public hygiene, let's take a step back and consider the cultural and philosophical aspects of using bodily fluids in the ancient Roman world. One of the most fascinating things about Roman society is that while they were incredibly sophisticated in many respects, building vast aqueducts, creating complex legal systems, and mastering engineering, they were also remarkably pragmatic when it came to matters of health and personal care. The idea that something as unsanitary as urine could be a cornerstone of their hygiene and medicals practices speaks to a broader Roman worldview that differed greatly from modern perceptions of cleanliness. For us, the idea of bodily fluids, especially urine, being used so openly in everyday life can be shocking. But for the Romans, bodily fluids were just part of the natural cycle of life. There was no real taboo against using what was naturally produced by the body. Instead, it was simply seen as another resource that could be repurposed. The Romans didn't have the knowledge of germs or bacteria that we do today, so their understanding of cleanliness was based on the practical application of what they knew worked. They believed that bodily fluids, whether sweat, saliva, or urine, were just part of the natural order, and using them to maintain health or personal hygiene was considered entirely acceptable. It's important to keep in mind that the Romans didn't have access to the vast array of cleaning products and medications that we now rely on. There was no store-bought toothpaste, no antibacterial ointment, and no hospital-grade antiseptics. Everything had to be made from natural resources. And in this context, urine, with its naturally occurring ammonia and cleansing properties, was as practical as anything else. It wasn't about grossness or disgust. It was simply about function. Urine was a tool, a resource, and a part of the everyday life that helped people maintain their health. In Roman society, the concept of personal hygiene was closely tied to notions of virtue and morality. Cleanliness wasn't just about looking good, it was seen as a sign of moral discipline. A clean body symbolized a clean mind, and by extension, a virtuous life. The Romans were known for their emphasis on order, discipline, and control, and these qualities extended to how they cared for their bodies. In a world where public appearances mattered and social status could be elevated by how well one maintained their physical appearance using every tool available, whether it was urine, olive oil, or herbal remedies, was part of ensuring that one maintained both physical and moral purity. This also ties into the idea that Roman medicine was as much about philosophy as it was about science. The Romans didn't separate the mind from the body in the way we do today. Their approach to health was deeply holistic, with an emphasis on balance, physical balance, mental balance, and social balance. A Roman's personal hygiene routine wasn't just about keeping diseases at bay, it was about keeping oneself in harmony with the world. Their belief in the power of urine wasn't just about using a practical cleaning agent, it was about understanding the body as a part of the larger natural cycle. In fact, urine wasn't just used for personal hygiene, it was also used in some of their most advanced medical practices. Roman physicians believed that urine could help balance the body's humors, which, according to their medical theory, needed to be in balance for a person to stay healthy. The use of urine in this context was tied to the ancient belief in bodily fluids as carriers of essential properties, whether those properties were curative, cleansing, or balancing. The Romans didn't have the knowledge we do about how diseases spread, but they did understand the importance of balance, both in their bodies and in the world around them. Historians still argue about whether the widespread use of urine for medical purposes reflected the Romans' remarkable understanding of health or whether it was just a product of the times. Some suggest that it was simply an example of how the Romans made the most of their available resources, using what nature provided to solve everyday problems. Others argue that the use of urine was emblematic of Roman culture's focus on balance and harmony between the body, mind, and the world around them. Either way, it's clear that the Romans viewed urine not as a waste product, but as a valuable tool, one that was an essential part of both their personal care and medical routines. As strange as it may seem to us, the Roman approach to urine was reflective of their worldview, a worldview that valued resourcefulness, practicality, and an understanding of balance in all things. For the Romans, nothing was wasted, and even the most intimate and personal bodily functions could be used for the greater good of health and hygiene. They didn't see their bodies as sources of waste, but as interconnected systems that needed careful maintenance. And so, whether it was for cleaning wounds, freshening breath, or improving skin, urine was simply another part of the toolkit that helped maintain the health, beauty, and virtue of the Roman people. In a world where public health was inextricably linked to personal health, the Romans made use of whatever resources they could find to ensure that their bodies, and by extension their society, remained in good working order. The idea that urine could be a vital part of this system makes perfect sense within the context of Roman philosophy, even if it seems odd by modern standards. As we've journeyed through the various ways the Romans used urine, from dental hygiene to medical treatments, let's now explore how this fascinating practice persisted long after the fall of the Roman Empire. While many ancient practices faded into obscurity with the rise of modern medicine, the use of urine as a medicinal and hygiene tool didn't vanish overnight. In fact, it continued to play a role in medical treatments for centuries to come, both in Europe and beyond. This lingering belief in the therapeutic powers of urine speaks volumes about the lasting impact of Roman cultural practices on later societies. In the Middle Ages, for instance, urine was still widely used in Europe, though the context had evolved somewhat. As the Roman Empire crumbled and knowledge of ancient techniques was lost, Many of the medical and hygiene practices once used by the Romans were passed down through the centuries. Urine, once a common remedy in the Roman world, remained in use, though by this time it was no longer widely seen as a clean or even sanitary substance. Instead, it had taken on a more medicinal role, particularly in the realm of alchemy and folk medicine. Alchemists during the medieval period, who were obsessed with turning base metals into gold and finding the elixir of life, often utilized urine in their potions and concoctions. The medieval understanding of urine was heavily influenced by Roman thought, and its use was often tied to the idea of purifying the body and restoring balance to the humors. While alchemists weren't necessarily using urine for the same everyday purposes as the Romans, such as mouthwash or skin treatments, they still saw it as a valuable tool for health and healing. Interestingly, some medieval medical texts continued to recommend the use of urine for treating wounds, infections, and even for diagnosing illnesses. The idea that urine could be a reflection of one's internal health persisted throughout the medieval period, and it wasn't uncommon for doctors to ask patients to bring a sample of their urine for examination. In fact, urine was a key diagnostic tool in medieval medicine. Physicians would examine the color, smell, and consistency of urine to determine the patient's overall health. A healthy person's urine was thought to be pale and clear, while darker or cloudier urine was seen as a sign of illness. This diagnostic practice was largely based on the Roman belief that bodily fluids, especially urine, could reveal important information about the state of the body. While medieval physicians didn't understand the biological causes of illness the way we do today, their reliance on urine as a diagnostic tool can be traced back directly to Roman practices. Over time, however, the use of urine in this way became more limited as scientific knowledge progressed and more effective diagnostic tools emerged. By the early modern period, the use of urine in medicine began to fade. The rise of modern chemistry and advancements in medical science in the 17th and 18th centuries pushed urine-based treatments to the sidelines. But the influence of Roman medical practices, including the use of urine, was still evident in some folk remedies and in the popular imagination. Even into the 19th century, there were occasional references to urine in medical texts and household remedies, particularly in rural areas where traditional practices held sway for longer periods of time. It's fascinating to think that the practice of using urine, which was once so common in Roman times, survived for over a millennium. While we might think of ancient medical practices as quaint or even primitive, many of them were passed down through generations and persisted for longer than we might expect. The use of urine in medicine is just one example of how ancient practices can endure through time, shaping the way people think about health and wellness long after the original context has faded away. Historians still debate how and why certain Roman medical practices, including the use of urine, continue to persist in medieval and early modern times. Some argue that the continuity of these practices was due to the lack of access to modern medicine, while others suggest that it was a reflection of a cultural mindset that valued natural remedies and believed in the power of the body's fluids to heal. Whatever the reason, it's clear that the Roman legacy of using urine as a health tool had lasting repercussions, influencing medical thought and practice for centuries. In fact, the continued use of urine in medical practices for so long is a reminder of just how deeply embedded Roman ideas about health were in the fabric of European medicine. The belief that urine could heal and restore balance, passed down through Roman, medieval, and early modern times, shows how some ancient practices can endure, even in the face of scientific progress. As we look back on the enduring legacy of Roman health practices, it's clear that the use of urine wasn't just a quirky or strange feature of Roman life. It was part of a much larger worldview that saw everything in nature as interconnected. Nothing was waste, and everything had a purpose. The Romans may have lacked the scientific knowledge we have today, but they understood that the body was a complex system that required balance and care. And in their eyes, even urine had its place in maintaining that balance. As we near the end of our journey through Roman health practices, let's take a step back and reflect on just how remarkable it is that such an ancient, often primitive practice, like using urine for hygiene and healthcare, had such staying power across time. The Romans, in their ingenuity and resourcefulness, may have lacked modern scientific knowledge, but they were remarkably adept at understanding the practical uses of the materials available to them. They had a holistic approach to health, where balance and practicality reigned supreme, and nothing, no matter how seemingly unpleasant, was beyond use. But what makes the practice of using urine in Roman society so fascinating is the contrast between their world and ours. Today we are deeply focused on sterilization, sanitation, and the modern understanding of health. In the Roman world, these ideas were not yet fully formed. Instead, Romans leaned into the practical and natural resources they had at hand, like urine. For them, the idea of clean wasn't based on the absence of germs, but on the ability to use nature's elements in a way that made sense to them. Urine, rich with ammonia, was a tool in their arsenal of hygiene and health practices, serving as a resource that helped them maintain their physical well-being. For modern audiences, it's easy to dismiss these ancient practices as outdated or even bizarre. And yes, it's hard for us to imagine gargling with urine or using it as a beauty treatment. But this reaction speaks to how far we've come in terms of medical understanding. The Romans, despite not having access to modern scientific methods, were highly resourceful, finding ways to optimize what nature gave them. In their world, nothing went to waste, and even urine, which we now associate with waste products, was a valuable asset. The true ingenuity of the Roman people wasn't just in their aqueducts or their roads, but in their ability to adapt and use whatever resources they had for the betterment of their society. The use of urine as a cleaning agent, beauty product, and medical treatment wasn't just a necessity. It was a testament to their creativity and practicality. The Romans didn't have antibiotics or antiseptics, but they made do with what they had. They didn't have modern dental care or skin creams, but they used urine to freshen their breath and rejuvenate their skin. In a time of limited resources, the Romans did the best they could, and their reliance on urine was simply one example of their clever, pragmatic approach to health. But despite their resourcefulness, we now know how much more there is to learn about health and hygiene. We've moved past the need for such rudimentary practices, and we now have the benefit of scientific knowledge and medical advancements. However, the Roman practice of using urine isn't something that can be dismissed entirely. In some ways, the modern world has returned to a more natural approach to health. Whether it's the rise of organic skincare products, natural remedies, or even the increasing interest in alternative medicine, there is a sort of renaissance happening where people are revisiting ancient practices in new contexts. While we would never advocate for the use of urine in modern medicine, the Roman obsession with using what nature gave them serves as a reminder of how, in times of necessity, people often turn to what is available in the environment. Perhaps in some strange way. This reflects an ongoing desire to reconnect with simpler, more organic forms of health. The Romans were limited by their lack of understanding of germs and bacteria, but their willingness to use natural resources to solve their problems can be seen as an early version of the holistic, sustainability-driven mindset that is becoming popular again today. Historians and scholars may still argue about the wisdom of Roman medical practices, and certainly, modern medicine has shown us far more effective methods of hygiene, treatment, and disease prevention. But we can't ignore the resourcefulness of the Romans and their deep commitment to maintaining both personal and public health. Their approach to hygiene, where everything, even urine, was treated as a valuable resource, was far ahead of its time in many ways. And while we can look at their practices through the lens of modern science and find them flawed, we should also recognize their ingenuity and adaptability. In the end, the use of urine in ancient Rome might seem strange, but it was a product of a society that had to make do with the limited tools they had. It was a practice based on practicality, not superstition, and it was part of a larger worldview that saw the body as a system to be carefully maintained. The Romans didn't waste anything, not food, not resources, and certainly not bodily fluids. And in their world, urine was simply another useful tool, like water or oil, to maintain the health, beauty, and balance of their society. Now, as we wind down, it's time to reflect on this rather peculiar but intriguing chapter of history. It's easy to see how far we've come since the Romans used urine for nearly everything, but there's something humbling about how they made the most of what they had, an approach that we can all take some inspiration from in our own lives. The Romans may have been a world away, but their ability to innovate with what was available speaks to a timeless quality of human ingenuity that transcends eras. As we come to the final stretch of our journey through ancient Roman hygiene, health practices, and their unorthodox use of urine, let's slow things down and ease into a more reflective tone. We've traveled through strange and surprising practices, from mouthwash and beauty routines to military medicine and beyond, all revolving around one common and somewhat controversial resource. But now, it's time to step back, take a deep breath, and appreciate the broader historical and cultural significance of these practices in their own context, and how they've shaped the way we view ancient civilizations today. What's fascinating about the Romans, and in particular their use of urine, is that it forces us to think outside the box. It challenges our modern assumptions about hygiene, cleanliness, and even what constitutes waste. In a world that prided itself on grand architecture, advanced plumbing systems, and powerful military conquests, the Romans also found beauty in the mundane. They saw value where we might see only filth. They understood that the resources they had, no matter how unusual, were tools that helped them build a healthy, functioning society. Even urine, an element of the body often considered waste today, was embraced as a powerful resource. But beyond just the practicality of using urine, there's a deeper lesson embedded in Roman practices that resonates even in the modern world. The Romans were masterful at adapting to their environment. They didn't have access to the wealth of knowledge and technology we have today, but they made the most of what they had. Urine wasn't just a byproduct of the body. It was a part of the daily life of an empire, used for health, hygiene, and even luxury. It represents the Roman ethos. Nothing went to waste, and everything had a purpose. Whether it was a tool for cleaning wounds or a beauty treatment, Urine was treated with the same respect as any other resource. As we reflect on the Roman attitude toward hygiene and health, we realize that they too were constantly innovating in ways that made their lives more efficient and functional, even with the limited tools at their disposal. In many ways, the Romans were ahead of their time, not because they had access to modern medicine or sophisticated tools, but because they understood the importance of practical solutions. They knew that health and hygiene weren't just about luxury, they were about survival, about maintaining balance, and about making do with what nature provided. This practical, almost resourceful approach to health might be one of the most enduring lessons from Roman society. It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest solutions, like using what's already available, can be the most effective. And while we'll never look at urine the same way again, we must admit that the Romans didn't just make do with what they had, they thrived. Their empire, spanning continents and lasting for centuries, was built on practical solutions, many of which, like the use of urine, have persisted in various forms throughout history. Modern medicine and hygiene may have moved on to more advanced, scientifically backed techniques, but we can still find echoes of Roman ingenuity in today's world. We have learned to be more mindful of what we use, what we discard, and how we can innovate with what's available. The Roman attitude toward resourcefulness and sustainability continues to inspire. Now, as we bring tonight's journey to a close, think about how our understanding of history is constantly evolving. What we once considered strange or primitive is often rooted in deeper layers of logic, necessity, and practicality. The Romans didn't see the use of urine as odd. It was simply another method of living well in a world where resources were limited and survival often depended on creative thinking. So, as you slip into a more relaxed state, remember this. In a time long ago, when the empire stretched across vast lands and technology was still in its infancy, the Romans, using only what was available, managed to build a civilization that has influenced the world in ways we're still uncovering today. And maybe, just maybe, there's a little Roman spirit in each of us, the ability to adapt, innovate, and make the most of the world around us. Now, take a deep breath and let the calmness of the night surround you. Let go of the day's worries, knowing that, like the Romans, you too are a part of the long, ongoing story of human ingenuity, resilience, and the drive to make the most of life's resources. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with as much resourcefulness and wisdom as the Romans possessed, even if you're not quite ready to try their methods of dental care.